Trauma can feel like a never ending storm. But what if healing is closer than you think? Today, we're diving into the tools, therapies, and the mindset shifts that can turn pain into progress.
Whether you or someone you love is navigating the aftermath of trauma, this episode will leave you with hope and practical steps of healing. I'm Natty,
I'm Vita,
and we are here to thrive. Welcome back to Thrive by the Rising Muse, the podcast where we talk about overcoming life's challenges and stepping into a place of growth and resilience. Today we are excited to welcome Daniel Gospodaker.
Gospodarer.
Gospodarek. Okay, thank you for that. To the show. Daniel is a licensed clinical social worker with extensive experience helping men heal from trauma and regain control of their lives. He specializes in working with populations like military members, first responders, and those dealing with traumatic injuries. Daniel brings a unique perspective, having overcome his own traumatic brain injury as a teenager, and now uses that experience to guide others through their healing journeys. Welcome to the Rising Muse, Daniel.
Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you both for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Daniel, let's start by talking about your story.
Yeah,
Can you share how your personal journey shaped your decision to specialize in trauma recovery?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, as was mentioned, I sustained a traumatic brain injury, or TBI for short, back when I was going into my senior year of high school. So in that summer between junior and senior year, and that being faced with that level of adversity at that age, and I mean, nobody can really do that type of work for you. I mean, the doctors and your family, your support network can support you in whatever way possible, right, and give you all the best treatment. But at the end of the day, like that's on you to push, to challenge, to kind of step into discomfort, and yeah, that kind of led me here. And there's a lot of small pieces inside that journey too, that were kind of light bulbs or big moments, kind of like reflecting back on that experience. That I was like, yeah, that was definitely a big factor. So, but that's a little bit about my TBI in a nutshell. So.
One of the things that stands out about your work is your focus on helping men navigate trauma and mental health challenges. Aside from the fact that you're a man, why specialize in men when seeking help, for seeking help?
Sure. So one of the things I recognized, especially being in the hospital, is it's predominantly females. There's more men now than there used to be decades ago, and there's still not. I mean, there are male social workers, male therapists. Don't get me wrong, but I would say majority are still dominated by females, and not that that's wrong or that it is what it is, but I think sometimes being a male and having walked through that difficulty or that difficult situation in terms of trauma and working through my own things around the TBI anger and stuff like that sometimes comes out. It's just like I have some of that, like I walked in your shoes.
Yes.
Right. And sometimes just having that and being a male can diffuse some of the stigma related to even males asking for help in general. So that's one of the reasons I jumped into that profession. And males also seek help a lot less than females. They ask for support a lot less, especially in terms of like medical or mental health. So being there, and then also blogging, doing podcasts, all this stuff to try to raise a little bit more awareness, or even though there is awareness growing, just to move that needle just a smidge, right? You never know who's going to see it.
Daniel, why do you think it's so hard for men to seek help, to get therapy, to even talk about their trauma?
So I'm going to make it a little bit broader than just trauma. I think there's kind of a piece of like, if you're not stoic, you're kind of crumbling. And you the reality is you can be both and you can be vulnerable, you can share as well as use that to empower or you know push you to different heights in your life. And then I think the more people that you have doing that, then that kind of raises awareness for others to do so as well. But I definitely think stigma is a huge part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, there are kind of like those micro niches, like military, first responders, right? That you don't want to be able to show weakness because others may look at you, or maybe it's just your perception that others will look at you as weak, right? Even in reality, if you mentioned it, maybe some of them would be like, "Oh yeah, I'm glad you're going. Like you looked like you were struggling there for a minute." So so sometimes it's our own selves that get in our way in terms
Mm-hmm.
of how are other people going to judge, or will they judge? Sometimes they don't. And then you're like, wow, I made all that up in my head. Now I'm exhausted.
Right.
So,
Do you think that culture has a lot to do with it too? Because the perception of the man has to be John Wayne. I'm aging myself here.
John Wayne,
Uh,
yeah, Clint Eastwood, all that stuff, right?
Okay, I don't know anybody right now. I don't watch regular television. I am in Teletubby. Well, not even, see, even I age myself. I'm
The
in
Rock.
Top of the Rock. Maybe somebody can identify that.
Yeah, there you go. The Rock, right?
I'm in Miss Rachel's world right now, so I know who's being a macho right now on TV.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, okay, the Rock people can identify.
Mm-hmm.
And if you uh, are showing any vulnerability, or then you're not a man, you're weak. Um, you see in social media men that not necessarily are feminine or anything, but if they show any sensibilities, they call them betas instead of alpha males. So that has, in my opinion, probably a lot to do with that.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's how we judge ourselves. It's how others also
Hmm.
perceive us, in and or don't even perceive us because sometimes people just don't have the bandwidth to even care because their lives are moving so fast. But we put that perception on ourselves.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, most definitely, most definitely. But we are seeing, there are pieces that are hitting more mainstream media around. I think it was during COVID, there was I can't remember his name. I think he was a senator or a representative who had to go to. He was hospitalized for depression, right? Like that was a very
Fetterman?
what's that?
Fetterman?
No, he
I
has
can't
stroke.
remember.
I can't remember.
I
Okay.
can't remember his name. I
Never mind.
want to say it was maybe like 2 years ago or so.
No,
It was,
it doesn't matter. I just thought.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we're seeing some of those pieces, but then we're also seeing other aspects, systemic barriers that show up too, right? Changes in policy, changes in funding for certain programs that would enable people to continue to seek help too.
Right.
So there's
Right.
lots of shifts going on. It's not just a stationary variable. There are many intersecting variables that move quite often.
Trauma is a very complicated thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it not just shows up emotionally. Sometimes shows with physical symptoms, with relationship struggles. How do you help your clients recognize that the things that they're going through beyond having an explosion, or or certain struggles in the relationship or physical symptoms, are symptoms of their trauma?
Yeah, I think there's a few ways to do that. So sometimes people come and they're like, "Hey, I'm having all these symptoms. I'm on these medications, but it's not helping." Right? That could be a sign. There's also pieces where people will notice patterns. Right? When I do XYZ in my relationship, this happens. Right? Or when I do, I'm trying to make up examples on the fly, but they notice these patterns that just kind of reoccur in their lives. And one of the ways that we work, or I work, especially with EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, or somatic experiencing therapy, is by being very curious about why, just being curious about how come that pattern repeats itself, like what leads to it. And sometimes that curiosity can just bring in almost a level of playfulness, which I think adults use or they lose as they age.
Mm-hmm.
um, and just being curious with it and saying, like, what is that? And then they're like, well, every time I feel this, I act like this,
Mhm.
right? And then it's like, okay, so what made you feel like that, right? And then they're like, well, when XYZ happened when I was a child, or I mean, it could be present day too, right? Like I just got laid off, so my ability to handle stress and my ability to go to anger is really close right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just, and that's kind of the complicated piece with trauma is it's kind of a broad topic, right? Because you have trauma, you have PTSD, you have complex PTSD, and then all the different pieces around relational trauma, developmental trauma. So
Before we go forward, can you explain for those who don't know what EMDR is?
yes, so EMDR therapy is a bottom up form of therapy, meaning that it starts with the body and the nervous system, and it works to heal that first before working on our cognitions that often get changed because of trauma, especially chronic or prolonged exposure to trauma. So essentially, EMDR works by doing some sort of motion left to right, and it can be tapping, it can be eye movements, it could be with buzzers or lights. And as long as we cross this kind of midline in our body, we're able to help our body heal and integrate those past traumatic experiences so that not that they never happened, because obviously we can't remove memories,
Right.
but we can have a memory, and we also have those memories where it's like, oh, when I think about that I feel really crappy.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
EMDR will take that kind of like crappiness hook or that crappiness charge off of that memory
To
so
kind
that
of
it just be a memory.
separate the emotion
Mhm.
from the event.
Yeah, I don't even want to say it separates. I just think that it integrates it, and the that
Got,
emotional charge just dissipates.
got it.
It's EMDR and then also somatic experiencing therapy are just very potent forms of psychotherapy that can really help us heal naturally. And I love that they focus on the natural piece and the bottom up, because it's the same thing. If you cut your hand when you're in the kitchen cutting carrots, like, you don't need to tell your body to heal, it knows what to do.
Mhm.
And just like with trauma, our bodies know how to heal, but we often get in the way with like judgments or guilt or shame or embarrassment, or chronic bullying, that nobody likes me. And then those little pieces are like infections inside that, like that trauma bump, right? And then that because of that infection, that trauma bump can't be integrated. And EMDR and somatic experiencing come through and they help remove that, so it can just be smooth.
My brother had a traumatic brain injury. It'll be going on 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
In 2020, he
Mm.
was in a coma for 8 days.
Mm-hmm.
And when he woke up, I was sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
He's in Alabama and I'm here in Georgia. But when he woke up, my brother was a totally different person. And that was a good thing. He was tough.
Yeah.
Being a policeman, all the jobs he had, dealt with policemen, escorting, um, security, all that. So he was real rigid and rough.
Mm-hmm.
When he woke up from his traumatic brain injury, he was sweet. He was caring. He was loving. And I'm like, I'm not even gonna get into this because I know it's just temporary.
Yeah.
No, we're
Mm.
going on 5 years.
Yeah.
And he is still totally opposite of what he was
Mm-hmm.
when he got hurt.
Mm.
And you know me, I'm crazy, right? Why couldn't you get clucked upside the head sooner? You know what I'm saying? No. Mm-mm. But it was real serious, very so much so he's not married, has no children, and our mother's um, gone. But they had to call me over here for me to give them permission to put a shot in his head to drain the fluid.
Mm.
And that's how serious it was. But he's not able to be a policeman anymore, escort. He was certified cremationist.
He was a workaholic.
Mm.
He had 6 jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Just him. He was working like he had a family of 10,
Yeah.
but he had 6 jobs and it was just him.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he misses a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He also was 18-wheeler.
Workaholic.
And what he misses the most out of his 6 jobs, he misses driving the 18 wheeler.
Mm-hmm.
He said when he's on the road and he sees that truck, it just does something to him. He just want to get up in it. But they told him in order for him to drive a truck again, he have to be off his seizure medicine for 2 years. And I told him
That's
it's
not
not
enough.
worth it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not worth it. We're not going to take that chance.
Yeah.
So now he's retired and he just does whatever he wants to do. He's driving him crazy, but I told him you'll get used to it. Because he's sick.
Yeah.
But everyone does not get to be that way.
Right. And sometimes it's reverse, right? You're like
Yes.
person, all you know is rage.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. He misses a lot, but the rage was in the beginning when they were trying to get his medication dosage right. But that was just a short time. And he's been fine ever since. Sometimes we think he's a little too caring, don't we? Yeah, we do. Let's talk about acceptance and commitment therapy. It's such a powerful approach. And how does ACT help clients embrace their emotions while also moving forward with their goals?
Yeah. So I think so. Acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT for short,
Mm-hmm.
really differentiates between goals as something that you achieve, right,
Mm-hmm.
and then values, which is something that's prolonged, right? You're constantly working towards it. So some examples would be like health, right? Like there's not like a day you just wake up and you're like, okay, I'm healthy. I can't get any healthier. I'm just gonna stop and throw in the towel. Or maybe it's the love for a child or the love for a partner. It's not like one day it's just gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's something you do every day. And there's a really potent part of ACT where it's like forget exactly how it goes, but essentially it's like I can tell you what you value just by watching you throughout the week,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because your behaviors will dictate what you value, even though you
Mm-hmm.
could say whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So one of the reasons ACT is so powerful is because it highlights your values. It also says like when you're living out your values, it doesn't mean that your pain or your suffering, if it's mental health or you know ability or disability or chronic illness, is going to go away,
Right.
right? It's how do you live out those values, even if it's just a small fraction, right? Case in point, like to your brother's situation, going from a workaholic to not being able to work some of those jobs or any jobs,
Right.
how do you still find your purpose even if it's on a fraction of that level of working 6 jobs, right? So that you
Mm-hmm.
can kind of keep that energy and that spirit alive inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how ACT kind of looks at mental health as well. As yes, you're going to have symptoms. Our job isn't to get rid of the symptoms. It's how do you live your life with those and still pursue your values.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Healing from mental health, from trauma, it's not, I have a headache, take 2 aspirin, and it'll go away in 30 minutes.
Yeah, not usually.
Mm-mm.
In my life of, and I think I'm a little older than you, I've never seen it happen.
Yeah.
But it's a process, and it's a long process.
Mm-hmm.
But you can stop your life and say, okay, I'm healing for the next 6 months, a year, and life is going to be here waiting for you.
Mhm.
You still have your job, your family, the regular stressors, finances, whatever are. How do you teach your clients to manage their progress and their healing while they're still managing everything else that it's in their lives?
That's a really beautiful question because it challenge you to think.
Okay.
And I think one way is you come in, and that's the thing too, is therapy is usually hour a week unless it's
Mhm.
like inpatient
Right.
inpatient or intensive outpatient. So
Mm-hmm.
you have 1 hour a week compared to all the hours in the week to
Right.
make this count, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. So when you come in and you sit down, how do you create that space for you to be authentically you and present, and to allow your body to say, this is what I want to focus on first?
Mm-hmm.
because cognitively I could know, hey, I got to pay this bill, but our body may sense something else is wrong,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in the session, right, we're going to work on grounding. We're going to find a way to create some space internally so that you can have some peace, or whomever I'm working with, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they can at least recharge, because life won't stop,
Right.
right? So they you can recharge in session on some level, and then also you can use that skill on the outs, then, right?
Mm-hmm.
To take a minute, to take 5 minutes to create some space so that you can recharge when you're at home, when you're, working a double or whatever it is, right? So really, it's about using the skills that are learned in therapy and then applying them and using them in real life. And then once that gets into a pattern, again, we're looking for these patterns, then we could say, okay, now let's notice, like, what is that biggest stressor and how does that show up in your body? Because some people say, like, my shoulders go up to my ears, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or my gut will just flip over.
Mm-hmm.
And then we start integrating that stress or trauma bump, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is. Mm-hmm.
This is serious and it's important. We talked about EMDR,
Mm-hmm.
and EMDR is eye movement desensitization. I even had that problem when I was in school and my instructor said, "You're pronouncing every syllable in there," and that's the other part. I said, "I want to make sure I don't say it wrong. Thank you." But it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a psychotherapy technique that helps people to process disturbing memories,
Mm-hmm.
and it's supposed to reduce stress.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
um Everybody
From
can
those
talk about,
memories.
yeah.
Mm.
And can you talk about that, how it helps to reduce stress?
Yeah. So if you take a memory, right, that has a bump, right,
Mm-hmm.
a trauma experience, a stress experience, maybe it's like a near car accident, right, and you're just like, right, takes the breath away. So
Mm-hmm.
that might leave a little mark in the body and the nervous system, right? So the person will come into the session, will say, okay, I'm gonna fast track the EMDR explanation or process because it's 8 phases. But it would essentially be, hey, think about that memory, right? And what's the worst part of that memory? And then we would go through and say, okay, what's the worst part of that memory? What's the worst image that comes up when you think about that memory? Are there any emotions, body sensations? How would you rate the distress on a 0 to 10 scale? 0 no distress, 10 the worst distress or disturbance you can imagine. And they might say a 7, right, or a 6 because my kid was in the back. And we'll essentially say, okay, I want you to notice that image. I want you to notice the emotions, the body sensations, and then depending on what form we're doing in terms of eye movements, going, you can't really see it, but eye movements going back and forth, or tapping, or if we're using the light bar, you just hold that memory in your mind's eye and you do the tapping or you do the eye movements, right? And then your body will naturally reintegrate that memory and take off some of that charge.
Mm-hmm.
Ask you something.
Mm-hmm.
Is EMDR kind of a evolution of old style desensitization? I'm remembering as you're talking, somebody had a phobia.
Mm-hmm.
Desensitize this. Now I'm the one
See
talking.
what I'm saying?
Desensitize. That okay? You know what I'm saying. Um, if somebody had like phobia of water,
Yeah.
you started with presenting them a picture of a pool until they could see the picture of the pool and not feel the anxiety anymore. Then you took them to the parking lot of the pool place, and you kept going until you could get them in the water.
Right.
And even though it's not the same process because you're not taking them places, it sounds like the mechanics in the brain is kind of the same thing, but it's a way more evolved version of that
Desensitization.
desensitization treatment that was, like I said, back in the Stone Ages when I went to school.
Yeah, I I would say that if you're going to use the terminology evolution, it's probably like millennia of evolution.
Okay.
Um, and what I mean by that is, actually, I'll share an experience. So, like going back to that car, right? Maybe the person's first image is like seeing the brake lights in the fog, right?
Mm-hmm.
But after we reprocess that image of that memory,
Mm-hmm.
it may change to I glanced in the mirror and I saw my child's face and he was sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the memory is starting the material is starting to move internally, even though we're physically not moving at all. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then what we see there as we reprocess those pieces of that memory is the thoughts related to that memory will
Mm-hmm.
go from maybe like shock and fear
Mm-hmm.
to that was way out of my control, but I responded in the best way I could.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
Of
you're
acceptance.
Yeah.
yeah, so you're seeing a huge cognitive shift versus like that paralyzed me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I think quite a bit more going on in terms of just exposure and
Mm-hmm.
working our way towards because
Mm-hmm.
now when those images pop up, there isn't that fear, there isn't that shock, there isn't that worry, right? Versus we're just going to move towards something in terms of like exposure therapy, right?
Okay.
Desensitize that response,
Got it.
right?
Makes sense.
And also, we want to say that EMDR is often used for PTSD
Oh yes,
patients.
yes, definitely.
And that's very important because when I was growing up, I remember people coming home from the war, Vietnam War, and they called them shell shock.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now we know it's PTSD. Um, and unfortunately, my dad was one of them. And in the beginning, we didn't know what was going on. But unfortunately, his turned into violence.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to leave. And our family was torn apart. I think that's another reason why I wanted to go to school and study behavior. I needed to understand what was going on. I also had trauma as a child, being abused, and just grew up thinking I wasn't good enough.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad I went to school and I studied behavior because when someone acts a certain way, it used to be I look at them and it crates. But now I want to get to that person to act. Tell me about your childhood.
Mm-hmm.
How did you grow up?
How Freudian of you.
Huh?
How Freudian of
Oh,
you.
yeah, thank you. It's called me Mrs. Freud.
Because he's all about the first 5 years and it's all about the past.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Yeah, but it definitely, when you learn the correct terminology,
Mm-hmm.
even your way of thinking has changed. Instead of saying, they just crazy. It's like, I wonder what happened
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
to them.
Yeah. Tell me what happened to you.
Yeah. And can you tell us, you work with prisoners, am I correct?
Yes.
Or
But
mixed?
in my outpatient, I don't. I
Okay.
don't work with males. So
Okay.
yeah, it's usually more of the military, first responders, dad stress, dad trauma,
Mm-hmm.
grief and loss,
Mm-hmm.
infidelity.
Mm-hmm.
So those are big pieces that show up, and they meet the trauma guidelines, but so not everything meets the PTSD guidelines, right?
Okay.
And then there's obviously the general things from a life threatening car accident, sexual abuse, child abuse,
Mm-hmm.
first responder exposure to violence, or something like that, right? Like that does meet the PTSD threshold. So
I think when we look at the news and everything that goes in the world, it's very easy for the regular people to forget all the things that people in positions of first responders see. You go to, and I'm saying simple, not as minimizing it, but as a simple car accident, and you might see people bleeding, or you might see limbs, or you might see, all kinds of stuff. Um, you in that same crash, you might see some sparks over here, so your adrenaline is at 3,000, trying to get that person out of there before that car goes boom. So it's not only the major events, like when something big goes boom, or
Mm-hmm.
there's shootings or stuff like that. There's even on your regular basis,
Sure.
you go to they go to, I don't know, a call, 911 call, a kid who drowns or is sick, or I'm a crime junkie, and I was living. I am, and but I saw this mom had serious postpartum, and they went to the house. They removed her to the hospital, but they didn't remove the kids. And she had a baby, like a couple of days old. She went to the hospital, spent a couple of days, and that day they put the kids, because she had a toddler and the little baby. In this particular, I can't remember if it was a cop or an EMT, but it was one, and he dressed the little boy, and he packed the little baby and fed him and put him in the ambulance wherever they were gonna go. Couple of, I think, weeks or days later, mom acted on her issues and hurt the baby. And you could hear the wailing of this man. How, he had only seen that baby once, but it's a baby. And now that baby was not alive.
Right.
And he went and got the toddler and got him out. But when he went into the other room, I mean, he was destroyed.
Sure.
And he was wailing. They had to get him out.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that people sometimes don't realize all the experiences that first responders go through on a day by day basis.
Yeah, and I think there's shared experience there too, because that first responder could have also been a father,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then there's another layer there of
Mm-hmm. I believe he was.
lived
And I
experience.
believe he had a young child. I don't know how young, but yeah. Yeah, a lot of transference. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's.
and I think, like, especially first responders in our world in general, right? Like, even if you just look at
Mm-hmm.
adults, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether you get laid off and you got to find a new job, and you don't even have time to process being laid off,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because your bills won't stop coming, and
Right.
it just, this world moves so fast. And first
Yes.
responders, for example, might get 2 to 5, 6, maybe more calls a day, or they're on one call all day, right?
Mm-hmm.
The same call, as in the plane crash, right? Recently in
Yes.
DC and then in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
So the two plane crashes, I mean, those are
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
multi-day sites,
Yes.
and you're not just dealing with witnessing, you're also retrieving, you're also processing
Mm-hmm.
information. And then I read another, it was a very powerful story of, I think it was one of the fathers of the plane that was hit, and he did 20 years in the military and was a
Mm-hmm.
helicopter
Yeah, I
pilot.
think it was the dad of the co-pilot that was
Yeah,
talking to the press.
so
Yeah.
he was like, I feel bad because I lost my son, but I also feel bad for my family in the military, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
like this complicated grief process there,
Mm-hmm.
and just how overwhelming that can be.
Yeah.
This is what I thought about the other day when it came on the news that the Black Hawk had crashed
Mm-hmm.
with a commercial airline, and they fell into the Potomac.
Mm-hmm.
I think the last time we talked about, no, it was it the Hudson River that the Scully,
Mm-hmm.
when he had to land the plane,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
was that the Hudson
Yeah.
or
Yeah, I
Yeah.
okay?
think so.
Total different place.
I'm seeing all the lights because they came in the dark,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're trying to rescue people,
Mm-hmm.
but then you realize that rescue turns into a recovery.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard anything yet that anyone
I don't think everybody
survived.
survived. No.
And then what? A couple of days later,
Mm-hmm.
the small plane
Mm-hmm. That was
crashes
yesterday.
in
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia.
Right.
And that was in a neighborhood.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, and the all of it is tragic. But in the Philadelphia one, there were only 6 people on the plane. So the majority of the people who were hurt were on the ground. So you have not only to deal with the plane and the fire, but now you have people on the ground and the houses, or I believe it was a busy intersection.
Mm-hmm.
And then who was on the plane? It was a little girl who had come to the United States to receive medical treatment, and now she was being discharged and was able to go home, and she died in that crash with her mom. You know, and if it affects me as somebody who doesn't even live near the area, I only saw it on the news.
Can't imagine.
I can only imagine, and the people who have to deal with doing the recovery, take those people to wherever the morgue or wherever they're going to go, to deal with the families that are around, especially of the people who had hurt it on the ground. I it's it's really, I don't know what the word would be, but it's really heavy.
It's a lot.
It's really heavy. So know that the work that you're doing is very important, because trauma is it's all around us,
And it's real.
but you're working with the people that have no choice but to deal. Their job is to be in trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Is if an accident happens to anybody I love, yes, it's traumatizing, but I have that one person and I have to handle that trauma. These people's job is to deal with trauma all day long. They see traumatic things between 3 to 5 times in a week, or maybe in a day.
Mm-hmm.
And humans were not built to do that.
Yeah, and then to go back and love your partner,
Mm-hmm.
your children, like nothing happened, right?
Yeah.
And human beings were not built to do that.
Mm-hmm.
If we look at the brain like a computer, that will short circuit you.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. There's a trauma response. There's also somewhat of vicarious exposure response for all of us, witnessing, especially if there are children involved, or close people that we can identify with. That vicarious piece that makes it also charged for just the people in the area or on the news. Yeah, it's a very heavy topic.
So know that the work that you're doing is very, very important.
Very.
Because the people that you are working with, you're helping them be healthy so that they can continue to help the community.
And then you having your TBI in high school.
Mm-hmm.
You were a child.
Yeah.
But it's like at that moment, you had to grow up quickly.
Yeah, I did. And I think that, looking back, it was also kind of one of the strengths that I took out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I didn't see it until you're, 2 to 5 years out.
Yeah.
But now it's, 15, 16 years. So.
And then your choice was to, now that I've been helped and I'm healing, because healing is continuous.
Mm-hmm.
I'm healing. I want to go back and get others so that they can come.
Yeah.
And move forward like I've been able to move forward with the help that I had.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it definitely guided me along that path in terms of where I would kind of land in terms of a career. And now it's just spreading the word and doing the work. So.
Yeah.
So wrapping up our conversation, if we have any listeners that are trying to get first steps on their path to healing, what would be your recommendation?
Definitely would be to And sometimes we don't even know what type of help it is, right? So just finding either a mental health counselor or a mental health therapist. Google's a great place. Check out reviews. And then also remember too that if you're going to pursue counseling or therapy with somebody, it's your therapy, it's your healing process. It's not the therapist, right? So if you don't, if you have a few sessions with somebody and you don't jive with them, just say, I appreciate your time. I'm just not feeling this. Do you
Mm-hmm.
have a referral for somebody else, or go back to Google to find somebody else that has different reviews, right? But that's your process, right? So own that. And if it's not clicking or it's not feeling right or you're just not feeling like that authenticity, just go move to the next one, right? If it becomes an issue where it's like, yeah, they're challenging me, each therapist is challenging me, so I just quit so I can avoid, right? That's another issue, right? So
Mhm.
to work on,
Yeah.
but that it's your process.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That Google has the information, the search engines, or if you know somebody that has a great therapist, just reach out to them,
Right.
Hmm.
right?
And what is important, I learned in school, it is important to find the right therapist for you.
Yes,
Okay?
definitely.
She may have a therapist. Am I putting your business? She may have a therapist, but then I go to that therapist, but it's not quite
Hmm.
right for me.
Sure.
And our instructor kept telling us, you've got to find a therapist that you um connect with.
Definitely.
Okay?
Definitely.
Instead of dreading, oh my God, I gotta go see this therapist again. We don't have nothing coming. They don't talk about nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you find that therapist and you can't wait
Mm-hmm.
to get to your appointment because in your journal
Hmm.
you're excited about sharing with them.
Yeah.
You told me to do A, B, and C last week, and I did. And when I put it on paper, I can see it clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Therapy is essential.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Therapy is a lifesaver
Yeah.
because unfortunately, a lot of people thought that whatever they were going through, it was going to be permanent. And I remember hearing that suicide,
Mm-hmm.
even though we're not talking about it, but trauma is trauma.
Hmm.
Suicide is a permanent solution for a temporary problem.
Hmm.
Just because that's your problem today doesn't mean it's going to be your problem for life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we have to have um, good support system.
Hmm.
Somebody need to notice that, you know, Ben's not acting right
Mm-hmm.
lately. He doesn't look right. When you don't have a support system, maybe nobody notices.
Yeah.
And by the time it is noticed, it could really be tragic.
Hmm.
So we thank God for you.
Hmm.
We thank God for what you do and the people that are in your field. We have um, been educated in behavioral health in the mental health field, and we do ours this way.
Mm-hmm.
You do yours one on one or in group session.
Mm-hmm.
It's all necessary,
Yeah.
it's all important. And for you to go through that and then decide I want to help others is awesome. My trauma is in my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to be an accountant when I graduated college back in the 80s. I don't even see myself being an accountant.
I don't do math.
Yeah, maybe that's why. But then when I went back to college, I went into behavioral health.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the best thing that I could have done because now I even understand myself better,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So
Definitely.
Daniel,
we're
I am
thankful.
so grateful for your wisdom,
Yes.
your experience, and again, for everything you're doing. We welcome you to the Rising Muse family.
Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time and for all the information you're giving us today.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on. I'm glad we could connect and make this happen.
Yeah, well, you have a blessed day.
Hold on one second,
Oh,
though.
Okay.
We have listeners. We also have viewers.
Yes.
So, do you have a website
Yeah.
or your
Yes.
email?
Oh, your blog.
Oh, your blog.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Can you
the
share
blog,
that information?
yeah, the blog is on the website revitalizementalhealth.com.
Mhm.
Instagram at revitalize underscore mental health. Facebook. I mean, pretty. If you Google revitalize mental health in Wisconsin, it'll come up. So
Awesome.
yeah, thank you so much.
No problem.
We thank you for the mission that you're on
Thank you.
to change people's lives.
I appreciate
And
it.
it's very important. Thank you, Daniel.
Have a good one.
Yeah, you both too. Thank you.
That was interesting.
It was.
That was a good conversation, and one of the things I admire about what he's doing is the fact that he's specializing in men.
Mhm.
Like he was saying, it's really hard for men because of the way society
Mhm.
talks on for them to feel that it's okay to seek help.
Mhm.
And we were talking in a previous show not too long ago about people of color.
Mhm.
It's even more predominant. In my culture, pure machismo.
Mhm.
I'm a man. Nothing is,
Mhm.
and
And in mine too.
it's machismo too. It's like, no, everything is fine. I don't need any help.
Mhm. Mhm.
You women who are all weak and weepy like to talk about your problems. I don't need to talk about my problems.
Mhm.
And it's sad because I think we all would have healthier relationships if we addressed any trauma.
The elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about.
I think at this point in life, it's bigger than an elephant. What's bigger than an elephant?
The Blob. Remember that movie, The Blob? Mhm.
Yeah.
But this is so important because I remember years ago, the men at our church had T-shirts that said "Real men cry,"
Mhm.
and I had to think about that.
Yeah.
Because the way boys are raised, be a man and be tough, but let me tell you this seriously: if a man is not crying, he's punching somebody
Or something.
or something, and that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My husband is a big man,
Mm-hmm.
football player, high school, college, Marine Corps, all that.
Mm-hmm.
But when I see him cry,
Mm.
it lets me know that Jesus is real,
Yeah.
because even in the toughest man,
Mm-hmm. And he's no wimpy man.
he's not wimpy at all.
Mm-mm.
He would be on the brawny paper cup.
Yeah.
Mhm. But seriously, men, Jesus cried.
Yeah.
And everyone,
Jesus
I'm
wept.
not crazy. Everyone does not worship Jesus,
Mhm.
does not worship God.
Mm-hmm.
But this is just common sense.
Yeah.
Trauma and tragedy happens.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, if we could take it out of our lives, but it's a part of life.
Right.
The question is not if something's going to happen.
How do you deal with it?
How are you going to deal with it?
Right.
Is it going to control you,
Mm-hmm.
or are you going to be able to control it? And the only way that you can control it is you got to get some help.
Yeah.
Somebody else has got to be able to help you, because if we could help ourselves, we would need therapists.
Here's the thing especially with trauma. When you are when a traumatic event happens, it's like a box comes over you, and you are locked into that box of that experience.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard for you to process all that information on your own,
Mm-hmm.
because you're not looking outside that box.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously we advocate for therapy,
Yes.
but not always is therapy. Sometimes talking to someone else, like you have support groups, you have other types of counseling, where you just process the information of the trauma, and that helps your brain process all that and make it to where the experience is not doesn't have the impact that it had when it happened.
Right.
The problem is when we do not process that information, it keeps having the impact that it had at the moment it happened. And the issue with that is if it does, like you said, if it doesn't come out one way, it come out another way. It could be coming out on anger. It could be come out on addictions. It could come out in problems with relationships, road rage,
domestic violence.
Domestic violence. It could come out in so many other destructive ways that are not helpful. So our recommendation is if you have had trauma. I remember Dr. Henry Cloud, who said that the only person who never had a dysfunctional family is the person who does not have a belly button. And I believe that not only that's true,
we all got that.
That's my point. And that was his point too. So not all trauma is big, but everybody, I mean, you live in this world. You wake up and just the fact that you turn the TV on and see something, it could be traumatizing. So not all trauma is, big, but all trauma needs to be processed.
Yes.
Because it affects your nervous system and the way it responds within your life. So find somebody to talk about, journal about it, get some help. Like I said, not everything is hospital, mental health, medication. There's from just talking to a friend to the hospital, there's a whole big gap of things. But if you have an experience, and now that I said that, let me say something. Do not minimize being traumatized by what you are watching on television. The news are not pleasant these days. A lot of things are happening very rapidly that affect our lives and not in a positive way. And that brings anxiety and fear, and it could be traumatizing. And don't let anybody, just turn the TV off and you won't see anything. And no, if this is affecting you, seek help. Talk to somebody that could, and nobody that's going to make fun of you.
Someone you trust.
Somebody you trust that's going to hear you, that's going to listen to you, and that might give you a different perspective or even at least some hope or a listening ear so that you can get that out of your system and you're able to process the information.
Yes. This is so important. A lot of people are walking around with trauma and they don't know what to do with it.
Right.
And it's coming out, like you said, in negative ways.
Absolutely.
God wants us to live a good life here on earth. But we've got to decide if we want to be healthy or we want to walk around traumatized.
Right.
So get help. It helped me. It helped her. And
it still does.
Excuse me. I had trauma in November. Remember my trauma in November?
Yes, I do.
I had to call my psychiatrist, not psychologist. I had to call the doctor and talk to them because I had trauma in November. And you saw me.
I did.
It was trauma. And it affected my physical body. It affected my mental. It affected everything. but I had to talk to my psychiatrist.
Mhm.
And then it's a process.
Yeah,
Gotta believe in the process.
absolutely.
I definitely believe in the process. Thank you, doctor. Shout out.
So I hope you've enjoyed this episode.
Yes.
If you did, please give it a like, share it with someone that would need it.
Please.
The only person that doesn't need it is the one without the belly button.
Mm-hmm.
And subscribe so that you can not only support us and this ministry, but also so that you don't miss any information that's coming out of this podcast.
Exactly. Exactly. And if you think you are in an abusive relationship, domestic violence, physical and non-physical, there's a number you can call 800-799-7233. Or you can text 887-888. Please make sure that you're in a safe place when you reach out for help.
And if you are experiencing a mental health crisis, please dial 988. But if it's a loved one who is experiencing the mental health crisis, please dial 911 or take them to the nearest emergency room. Remember, no matter how heavy life feels, you have the strength to rise and thrive. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We are at the Rising Muse in all platforms. And until next time,
Don't forget to thrive.
Have a blessed day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.